Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The suspect who opened fire at the White House Correspondents' Association dinner has now been charged with the attempted assassination of U.S. President Donald Trump and could face life in prison. The White House blamed violence on systematic demonization of President Trump as the root of Saturday's shooting. The U.S. envoy to the United Nations has called for a multinational coalition to secure the Strait of Hormuz as Iran draws closer to Russia. Iran's top diplomat met with Russian President Vladimir Putin and said U.S. leaders want to negotiate because they have achieved none of their goals in the war. Starting this week, South Korea has begun rolling out a relief fund worth about $4 billion to help ease the burden of soaring living costs driven by high oil prices. We begin this morning in the United States. The man accused of opening fire at an event attended by President Donald Trump and members of his cabinet on Saturday has been formally indicted and faces up to life in prison. The White House blamed political rhetoric for the attack and ordered an urgent security review ahead of the nation's 250th anniversary celebrations. Our Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
The suspect in the shooting at the White House Correspondents' Association dinner has been charged with the attempted assassination of U.S. President Donald Trump and could face life in prison. On Monday local time, the U.S. Department of Justice formally indicted Cole Thomas Allen.
Today, the Department of Justice filed 3 federal charges in United States District Court against Cole Thomas Allen. The first count is attempted assassination of the President of the United States. This count is punishable by up to life in prison.
Allen faces 2 additional charges: the interstate transportation of a firearm to commit a felony and the discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence in what U.S. prosecutors called a premeditated attack. Officials confirmed Allen traveled across state lines from California and positioned himself just 1 floor above the ballroom where the president was attending the event. He was apprehended carrying a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, a .38 caliber semi-automatic handgun, and at least 3 knives. The White House swiftly condemned the attack, pointing to a newly discovered manifesto written by the suspect that detailed a clear intent to inflict massive harm on the president and other administration officials.
This political violence stems from a systemic demonization of him and his supporters by commentators, yes, by elected members of the Democrat Party and even some in the media.
The shooting triggered a security emergency in Washington, with the breach coming as the United States prepares to host a series of major public events and large-scale gatherings to celebrate the 250th anniversary of its founding. To address vulnerabilities, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles is convening an urgent meeting early this week with top leadership from the Department of Homeland Security and the Secret Service to completely overhaul protection protocols for the upcoming national celebrations. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations is calling for a coalition to secure the Strait of Hormuz while accusing Iran of hostage-taking. However, Tehran says it's not bound by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, asserting Iran's sovereignty over the route as it moves closer to Russia. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations is calling for a multinational coalition to restore safe navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, accusing Iran of unlawfully disrupting one of the world's most vital shipping routes. Addressing a UN Security Council session on maritime security, Mike Waltz stressed that global waterways must remain open and cannot be controlled by any single nation, warning that Tehran is using the strait as a geopolitical leverage with far-reaching consequences. In response, Iran's ambassador to the United Nations, Amir Saeed Iravani, asserted Iran's sovereignty, particularly in the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz. He emphasized that Iran is not bound by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, except for provisions recognized as customary international law.
Iran is not a party to the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, Accordingly, it is not bound by its treaty-based provisions except to the extent that specific rules reflected therein are universally recognized as customary international law.
At the same time, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi suggested a shift in tone, saying Tehran is considering negotiations. He argued that despite the United States' global power, Washington failed to achieve its objectives in the conflict, prompting renewed calls for dialogue. Araghchi made the remarks during a visit to St. Petersburg for talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Putin said he hoped Iran would overcome what he called a difficult period and that peace should ultimately prevail.
Of course, we very much hope that based on this courage and will for independence, the Iranian people will, under the leadership of a new leader, make it through this difficult period of trials and that peace will follow.
Russia has positioned itself as a potential mediator in the crisis, following U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran that Moscow has strongly condemned. It has also proposed storing Iran's enriched uranium as a way to ease tensions, though Washington has not accepted the offer. The growing alignment between Moscow and Tehran comes amid deepening strategic ties. The two countries signed a 20-year partnership agreement last year, and Russia is currently constructing additional nuclear reactors at Iran's Bashir facility, the country's only nuclear power plant. Araghchi reaffirmed that cooperation between the two nations will continue to expand, and thanked Moscow for its ongoing support. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Starting Monday, South Korea has begun distributing over $4 billion relief package to help ease the burden of soaring living costs driven by high oil prices. Our Kim Jun-ong went out for early reactions from the ground.
The government's so-called high oil price relief fund come at a critical time. It's especially helpful for the initial group of recipients, which includes vulnerable people, many of them elderly.
I came to the community center to receive the payment. Prices are just too high these days, so it really helps, especially for daily expenses like groceries. It will cut my spending by almost half.
I receive basic welfare support regularly, but even with that, I have to be very careful with my spending. But with this additional payment, I can afford to visit the hospital and buy an extra side dish. It really helps with daily life.
Across the nearby shopping area, stores have started putting up stickers one by one, showing they accept the support payments. The latest cash assistance can only be used at small businesses with annual sales below $2 million. Here at this traditional market, merchants are already hoping for more customers from the first day.
Since the Middle East war began, the number of customers at my store has dropped by about 20 to 30% as people are holding back on spending. But once they receive this money, they may be more willing to spend again.
There was a time before when the government provided support payments, and it really helped. I'm hoping this will bring in more customers and help me run my business just like last time.
In past economic downturns, such as during the COVID-19 pandemic, the government provided financial support, often with a focus on the more vulnerable. The latest relief package follows a similar pattern.
Efforts to provide stronger support for vulnerable groups are generally welcomed. They could also help lift spending, even if only modestly, among those facing temporary difficulties.
With uncertainty still surrounding the Middle East conflict, attention is now on whether the support can help revive frozen consumer spending. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
So the Korean government has been working to ease the impact of soaring living costs driven by high oil prices. And for more on this, we're joined today by Professor Song Soo-young, professor at the College of Business and Economics at Chungang University. Professor Song, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
So this relief fund will be rolled out to those in the bottom 70% of income earners in the country. Will this help cushion the heavy economic blow from the Middle East conflict, as the government suggests?
Obviously, this would be a help to the people whose earnings and income and wealth is below some poor level or in the middle. So it would be clearly helpful, but modestly, its effect on the economic performance is modest, I believe. And The reason is this kind of sentiment has been clearly revealed in the Bank of Korea's composite consumer index has shown that it has been dropped below 100. As a result, this implies that despite the very high performance of the semiconductor industry and our overall economy on average, the disparity between the high earners and the low earners are clearly evident. And that this could turn out to be some kind of K-type recovery or performance of the economy, even though there is some performance improvement over the upcoming several months. But in the future, the prospect of the world economy and trade is clearly uncertain, and because of the extended conflict between Iran and the USA. So as a result, this fund should be used to reinvigorate the consumption and to support the economy. And in addition to that, I believe that several policies are necessary to overcome and maneuver this moment of crisis.
I see. And the IMF recently projected South Korea's pension spending will increase at the fastest pace among G20 economies by 2030. So what do you think is needed to address this issue in the long term?
Yeah, clearly, this is democratic decline in South Korea is the cause of the problem of the declining possible output that could be accomplished in South Korean economy with the full utilization of the labor and capital. However, when you decompose the demographic decline, I find that there are two aspects. One is increasing aging population. The other one is fertility rate decline. Fertility rate decline clearly has an impact on the long-term performance of our economy. But aging population very imminent, and data has shown that the speed of the aging population and non-working older peoples has been greatly increased. So pension system may need to be adjusted to that situation because the overall health quality has been improved, and therefore we could a little bit delay some full retirement benefit age from currently 65 years old to 67 years. Accordingly, what is necessary to support this revision of the pension system is the retirement age out of the workplace should be delayed also. That means currently in most workplace, the age of retirement around 60 years old, there is a gap between the full benefit of disbursement of pension and some retirement. Therefore, we need to extend some work hours for the economy. Then some people is worried about this could have some crowding out effect on the young age workers. But according to the research in the other country, it's clearly shown that it does not have a clear, very effect on the youth job opportunity at all. The reason is because we clearly see that AI and the digital industry induced some productivity gain for the new generations of work age, but it is not good at all available for the older age generations. So there is a clear disparity. Therefore, as a result, this pension system revision might be needed as in due course.
Right, and I also want to ask you about the stock market because the combined market capitalization of South Korea's stock market has surpassed 6,000 trillion Korean won. That's over $4 trillion US dollars. And this marks a 2.7-fold increase over the past year. So what's driving this growth and what risks should investors be cautious about?
According to data in the United States and Fed, that has shown that in the year of 2025, South Korea is just next to Singapore and Norway. for holding the equities in the U.S. equities around the world. So that means there is a huge outflow of our fund from Korea to United States equities. Of course, with the help of the Korea exchange and some kind of receipt settlement system is available to facilitate so-called minor investors or so-called ant investors to participate in the purchase of the foreign, particularly U.S. equities. And the tendency has been, I believe, that in the year of the 2026, it has been reversed. So that means inflow to fund from the Korean foreign investors has been increased greatly, combined with the surge of the performance of Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. That has improved the inflow of Korean investors who has an outflow to the United States or other countries coming into. That has doubled down the effect of the Kospi index surpassed some 6,500 points. But clearly, the outlook of our Korean economy in terms of the, as I told earlier, that consumer sentiment index and the other performance index, even though currently semiconductor industry is good, performed good, it cannot be lasted for long. So we need to find some kind of industry, not only to help the economy to grow steadily, and also to find job opportunities. As a result, the Prime Minister, Vice Minister of the Economics Plan, and has shown that the bio and the defense industry, some kind of a manufacturing industry would be of help to put the Korean economy on the path to recovery.
I see. All right, Professor Song, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
An appellate court is set to deliver a verdict on Tuesday in the case of former First Lady Kim Gun-hee over multiple charges, including accepting luxury goods. The Seoul High Court will rule after both Kim and Special Counsel Min Jung-gi appealed a lower court decision that sentenced her to 20 months in prison. In the first trial, Kim was found guilty of receiving a luxury handbag and a diamond necklace from the Unification Church in 2022. She was acquitted of stock manipulation and political funding charges involving former President Yoon Suk-yeol, with the court ruling there was no clear evidence of involvement or financial gain. Tuesday's ruling will determine whether that sentence and acquittals stand. Vintage and re-commerce isn't just a trend, but is now a steady form of consumption here in South Korea. Nowhere is this more evident than at Dongmyo Flea Market in central Seoul, which has now grown into a vibrant cultural hotspot where shoppers of all ages come together to hunt for timeless value. Our Chung Il-im was there.
Entering Dongmyo Flea Market in central Seoul, the atmosphere stands out. Vendors sell a wide range of goods, from vintage watches to used electronics, but the biggest draw is piles of secondhand clothing. Shoppers dig through them for shirts, trousers, and jackets, usually priced between 2,000 and 5,000 won, about $2 per item. This place was once considered an affordable clothing market for older generations, but the demographic has noticeably shifted in recent years.
I came here to relax after my school exams. I like the old vintage and retro vibe, and I'm hoping to buy a designer jacket today.
I heard Dongmyo is famous for its vintage items, so I came looking for some bracelets and rings.
For young people, Dongmyo has become more than just a place to shop. Spurred by social media posts and visits from K-pop stars, the area has evolved into a cultural landmark for experience consumption, the act of digging for your own personal finds.
My friends are recommend this place. It's very cool. We bought a suitcase, a clothes, and a cap.
But the hunting for ground-level bargains isn't the only reason people come here.
Dongmyo not only has a variety of clothing, but is also famous for pieces that are timeless, such as limited edition brand clothes. And many shoppers come here to add these to their fashion collection.
This expanding multi-generational customer base is bringing a fresh wave of economic vitality to the local merchants.
We see teenagers as young as 15 to people in their early 20s as customers these days. But there are still many older folks, so people of all ages really come here. Sales were solid, but have increased since the weather has become warmer.
With its unique blend of history and modern fashion trends, Dongmyo continues to solidify its position as the center of South Korea's growing vintage market. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choo Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Britain's King Charles and Queen Camilla arrived in Washington on Monday for a 4-day state visit, the first by a British monarch to the United States in 20 years. President Trump received the royal couple at the White House on Monday afternoon. The schedule includes a congressional address on Tuesday, a state dinner, and a visit to New York to honor the victims of the September 11th attacks. The visit comes as U.S.-UK relations are strained over disagreements on the Iran war, with Trump criticizing Britain for its lack of support for the U.S.-Israeli offensive. President Trump on Monday called for ABC to fire the late-night host Jimmy Kimmel after Kimmel made a joke about Melania Trump ahead of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. In a parody segment last Thursday about the upcoming dinner, Kimmel said Melania, quote, had a glow like an expectant widow. A shooting at the dinner on Saturday led to a Secret Service agent being wounded. Melania on Monday called Kimmel's remarks, quote, corrosive, and urged ABC to take action. Trump called the joke far beyond acceptable and demanded Kimmel's immediate removal. ABC and Disney have not responded to requests for comment. A small passenger plane crashed on Monday near South Sudan's capital, Juba, killing all 14 people on board. The Cessna aircraft lost contact with air traffic controllers 28 minutes into the flight. Preliminary reports indicate bad weather and low visibility as possible factors. Among those killed were 2 Kenyans and 12 South Sudanese. A team has been dispatched to the crash site to support emergency services. Nearly 2,000 years after Mount Vesuvius buried the ancient Roman city of Pompeii, artificial intelligence is now rebuilding the face of one of its victims. Pompeii Archaeological Park released an image on Monday showing what a man found near one of the city's gates may have looked like in his final moments, crouching for cover as the volcano erupted. His remains were found alongside a terracotta bowl, believed to have been his only shield against the falling debris. He was also carrying a lamp and 10 bronze coins, suggesting he was trying to flee when the eruption overtook him.
Cloudy skies remain over the capital area, and much of the country will stay overcast throughout the day today. Drizzle, however, will continue through the morning across the central regions and Jeju-do Island, while Gangwon-do province will see rain into the afternoon. However, the risk of fire is not gone yet. Recent rain helped to ease dryness in the capital area, but advisories remain in place for many of the central parts of Korea. And with gusty winds blowing nationwide, fire weather danger remains a concern. Temperatures will be lower nationwide today. Afternoon highs in Seoul will be a few degrees lower than average, and tomorrow morning will be even chillier than today. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 17 degrees Celsius. Daegu will be topping out at 21 degrees. Air quality will be good all day nationwide today. Then skies turn sunnier starting tomorrow, and a stretch of calmer spring weather follows. Do expect warmer afternoons and cooler mornings and wide day-to-night temperature swings for the next several days.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.